Welcome to the Soul Touched by Dogs podcast, the show for dog lovers who see dogs not as toys or tools, but wise souls worth our respect and care. I'm Anke Herman, and I'm your host. I talk to awesome humans, people who do great work for dogs and their people. So come and join us for today's conversation. Hello and welcome, Marilyn. I'm super excited to have you here.
Oh, Anka, thank you so much. I'm really excited to do this. This is going to be a lot of fun.
For sure, I have no doubts. So let's just dive straight in. Let people know where in this lovely world you are and what's your business
Ah,
with
yes.
dogs.
Yeah, I am in the US. I am in Tennessee, um, Dolly Parton country in East Tennessee in the Smoky Mountains. And I am a transplant from New York State, where I grew up until about 20 years ago when I moved to the South. So that's where I am now. And I work online since COVID. I made that pivot and I work with people online. So even though I'm here in beautiful East Tennessee, I can work with people anywhere in the world, which is a joy.
I love that. I love that. So you've just told me just before you've been in that game for quite a while.
Mhm.
So what's the changes? What's the biggest change you've seen since when
Ah,
you started
mhm.
compared to what we're dealing with today?
Yeah, I have been fascinated with training dogs ever since I was a child. And I started to do it as I worked as a teacher. That was my real job for many years. And I worked with human children, human students, and dog students simultaneously. So I started working seriously and professionally with dogs and people 40, 50 years ago. That was a long time. And back then, the way we approached teaching dogs and training dogs was very different from the way it is now. There are still some remnants of that old approach, those old techniques. They're still hanging around a little bit, but there's a huge evolution going on in the dog world, in how we view dogs and how we look at dogs. And that is thanks to all of not only the research that's being done in universities around the world, but also in the way that very forward-thinking, progressive, compassionate people are approaching their work with dogs. And a lot of those people, I feel, some of them I know personally, but some of them I just follow. And I feel as if all of them have been my mentors in the way I have completely transformed the way I work with dogs. And what I found um, when COVID hit and we all had to really do some quick adaptations of how we work, what I found is I started to talk to people who were not just in my geographic area, but people all over the world. And what I discovered was that there was a common thread across the globe of dogs that were distressed, dogs that were traumatized, dogs that were highly sensitive, and were having a lot of trouble just functioning in daily life in society. So I didn't expect to find that
Mm.
because I had been working locally with dogs in my own geographic area. But as I sat back and thought about what I learned from these people all over the world and what I had been observing with the dogs that I worked with personally, I saw, yes, I can see that's the piece that was missing when I was working with these dogs. I was using an old approach, which was still, it was positive. It was, I mean, we never did anything aversive or harmful to the dogs, but it was still addressing those feelings, those big feelings that dogs were having, by trying to change the behavior that was a result of those feelings, instead of really addressing the feelings that were really at the root of what
Mm.
was going on.
That makes so much sense. I'm curious, do you find
Yes.
that over the years dogs are more sensitive now? Or, like is it that in older days people just didn't kind of pay that much attention or just intimidated the life out of a dog,
Yeah.
or like are dogs more exposed to more things or to more like stressful situations, or is that just a perception that dogs seem to be more, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I've read things where it's just like, oh yeah, there's more dogs with reactivity, with kind of behaviors that would stem from some kind of, um, you know, stressed out stage, kind of,
Yeah.
So is that
Yeah.
is that getting worse, or is it just that we're noticing it more?
That is really the question, isn't it?
Mm.
That really gets to the whole point of working with these dogs. Are they getting worse, or are we just noticing it more? And I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I can tell you what my intuition tells me is going on, but of course, that's just my feeling about it. And as the more I talk to people who are caring for these dogs, the more I understand about what's going on with the dog. So the research that I've seen has enormous percentages of dogs. Like I've seen percentages like 80, 85% of dog owners who were polled about what their dogs were experiencing said that their dogs were reactive or hypersensitive. That's mind-blowing when you think about it, but that's only the people who were asked and answered the percentage. So do more people answer questionnaires like that if the question, relates to what they're going through, and the ones who say, nah, that doesn't apply to me, they don't answer the questionnaire. So, does that impact the results? Who knows? But here's what I can intuitively sense from the people that I talk to is that we we have a society that is changing at such a rapid pace. There's probably been more change in the last 10 years, say, than there was in the last 100. Who knows? I'm just making up
Mm.
those numbers, but just to kind of
It's massive,
get
yeah.
the idea across. And dogs are animals that don't have access to, understanding technology or hearing news or any of those things. They are just trying to make sense of the world around them. And so I think it's a two-pronged problem. I think that the dogs are struggling to keep up. And some of them have a capacity to do that. Some of them have more of an ability to adapt. And of course, adaptability is key because if we can't adapt, we're not going to survive. So some dogs have the ability to adapt and they do okay. Others struggle to adapt. They have a more sensitive nervous system. We know that that's true of people, right? There is something called highly sensitive person, and that's been demonstrated and researched and all of that. And we also know that that high sensitivity applies to animals as well. So I think the dogs that are naturally highly sensitive struggle more to adapt to this fast changing society. So I think that's one piece of it. And I think the other piece of it is that the people who are caring for dogs are maybe they're adapting to the society changes, but they're not adapting when it comes to the tools they use to help their dogs, to raise their dogs, to train their dogs.
Mm.
They're using outdated methods and beliefs and systems to address the sensitivity of a dog that's struggling. So it's kind of like, two opposite forces crashing together.
Totally.
And yeah.
Do you
Does
think
that
that
make
also
sense?
plays a role now? Because when you think about that, like, like my grandpa, right? He went, he left university and took a job, and that was the job he had, right? So my dad changed two or three times throughout his life. I can't even count how many times I've changed, right? So I mean, that's probably not helping either. Like even practically, when looking how much dogs kind of like the routine of knowing what's going to happen, like our lives are crazier. There's a
Mhm.
lot more irregularity. It's not like, okay, you go to him. And I actually, now it reminds me of my Leo, like he hated being left alone. It was
Mhm.
a real big problem until I started going to yoga classes twice a week because I was working from home. So he was like, sometimes he'd be like weeks without being alone. And all of a sudden I had to go somewhere and he never knew what was coming, right? And there he was always on edge. The moment I was like, okay, every Tuesday, every Thursday, she grabs this mat and then I know what's going to happen. That was the first time I saw him settle down on the sofa when I was about to leave because he
Mhm.
knew what was, and I think, do you think that plays a role as well?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Because what you're talking about is predictability.
Yeah,
And our brains are hardwired for predictability because that keeps us safe.
yeah.
And that's one of the things that's missing with a lot of our traumatized or sensitive dogs. Maybe they came from situations where they either had no predictability, so they never knew what was going to happen next, or the
Too much of it.
predictability was there, but it was something sad and dangerous and scary.
Mm, yeah.
So, yeah, predictability is huge. And when I work with traumatized and sensitive dogs, that's one of the things that we um, that's one of the pillars of the program that I use to help them. And this is a program that I created from scratch
Mm,
because none of the traditional dog training programs were appropriate for helping dogs. They were all focused on changing the behavior that you see
yeah.
instead of looking at the reason for the behavior that we can't see.
Yeah.
That's beneath everything. So, I actually looked at what therapists do for humans. And there are a few people who have skills in both areas and they work with dogs, but they also had a career or currently have a career as a psychotherapist for humans.
Mm,
And so the two skills are very closely integrated. So I looked at that, and that's what I based my program on because I already knew I knew how to train behaviors. I've been doing that for decades, so I knew how to do that. But that wasn't helping the sensitive dog. So I had to ask, what can I do for them where they can, feel safe enough to learn because they didn't feel safe, and that was one of the reasons they couldn't learn. They were constantly in this fight or flight. Am I safe? Am I not safe? What do I have to do? Do I have to run away? Do I have to fight it off? And that's where you get dogs that, explode into this barking, frantic, hyper arousal because they feel like they have to make the scary thing go away and they have to look tough and dangerous. So, and it looks like aggression, and people say, why is that dog? My dog isn't aggressive, but why is he so aggressive? And well, aggressive is something aggression is something different. That dog is just scared.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
I saw that actually with mine. He got bitten when he was 11 months old. Yeah, and
oh,
he was, and he was tiny, and his whole, like you could see it in his little, like his whole perception of the world is, well, he had, I found him in the street, so he knew probably by then that the world wasn't that friendly, right? But he was quite happy to approach, like, I'm cute and you know it, and that dog didn't take that very well, right? And so he was never quite the same after that, because
Yeah.
that sense of safety, that sense of um yeah, it's kind of, there was always that sense of dangers, and he would, like, when there was like a big male dog in confined spaces, right, he would be that little dog that went off, because
Yeah.
it was, and you could really see it, how it was about, like, no, 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 I'm actually scared shitless here, and I just want this thing to go away, and this is all I know how to do. The other one would sort of shrink. He'd hide in flower pots, so he was literally the opposite in a sense, because he had lived the first few weeks in environments that no dog should, and it's really interesting to see how that shows up, whereas the big girls now, they've not ever had anybody threatening that sense of safety in the world, and it's night and day. So what in your experience, like, or in your program, or like, what's one thing about safety or feeling safe for a dog that you wish people knew?
Yes. And so what happened with your guy, I can actually relate a similar story, and I'll do that in a minute. But what happened with him is that, as you said, he walked up to the other dog, like, here I am, and I want to make friends. And the dog bit him. And so his trust was just shattered.
Yeah.
And trust is something that is so fragile that once it's broken, it takes a long time to put it back together again. And sometimes you can't. And it depends on the dog's nature and personality and the way he perceives the world around him and so forth, whether he is able to do that. Some dogs can't, and some dogs can. But what I wish people knew about safety, what a great question, is that feeling safe is something that happens internally in an individual. You can't teach it, you can't train it, you can't persuade a dog to feel safe. So if he's scared of something, you can't talk him out of being scared. People will try to do that, like, oh, it's okay, don't worry, don't be scared. Safety is a felt sensation that is inside the animal. It comes from a belief. And if they don't believe that the environment around them is not dangerous, that there are no threats, that they are free to move about. And also, the other piece of that, of feeling safe, that's so important, is dogs must know how to find their safe exit. So if they're in a situation where something scares them, they have to know how they can escape it, how they can exit, how they can get away from it. Because one of the safest things that we can do to help dogs that feel scared is give them distance from the thing. That's the first thing that I tell people to do. If your dog is scared of something, get distance from it. The dog will tell you when that distance is enough for him, and it's different for each dog and it's different in each situation. But you need to get far away from it. And what people tend to do often is the opposite. They will tell the dog, now sit quietly and watch this big scary thing coming toward you. It's like, I gave this example to someone not long ago. So imagine that you're standing on a street corner and you see a bus coming at you. You're not going to stop and think what to do.
Just sit
You're not
here
going to
and
figure it out. You're not
contemplate.
going to ask. You're going to get out of the way. But suppose there was somebody standing next to you and said, now I want you to sit here and I want you to just look at me. Don't look at that bus. Just look at me and I want you to sit here quietly. Oh my God, does that make any sense? Are you going to feel better? So, so I think that, you know, feeling safe is something that you have to believe. If you jump out of the way and you go stand like inside a building, oh, okay, I feel better now. I feel safe because you took action. So when dogs are afraid of something, in order to regain their sense of safety, they have to feel free to take the action that their automatic nervous system is telling them to take.
Hmm.
So jumping out of the way of the bus is automatic. You don't think about that. So, right? So the dog has to have the freedom to jump out of the way, to find that safe exit, to know where it is. And knowing where it is helps the dog believe that he's safe, because if something bad happens, I've got a way out. I've got a way to be safe, and I know where my safe exit is. And just knowing it's there, whether they use it or not, but knowing it's there helps. And the problem that happens with a lot of sensitive dogs out in the world is that when we take them out in the world, they're on a leash. We need to use a leash. We need to keep our dogs safe. We can't just let them randomly roam wherever, because the world today isn't safe. 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was safe for dogs to do that.
Hmm.
I can remember, I don't ever remember dogs in my family having a fence. They wandered around, they did what they wanted to do, and they came home. And the neighborhood dogs did that. We can't let our dogs do that anymore unless we live in a big open space in the country, but most of us don't. So the dogs have to be on a leash, but what does that leash do? For a frightened dog, it cuts off their freedom to escape. It makes them feel trapped.
I actually, actually did that a couple of times because Leo was literally what I'd noticed was when we out sort of on the beach in a wide open space, he was fine, right?
Yeah.
But when it was in the center where we lived in a little narrow cobblestone, and there was like, and I remember like with dogs, I knew, when people would come across, and he was like getting like his little tail up, and I know he's gonna go for that dog. I'm like, okay. And I unclipped his leash, because it was pedestrian, like there were no cars, and I
Yeah.
also only did it
Right.
when I knew the dog, right?
Yeah.
And then
Uh-huh.
he'd be like, all right, do, and nothing ever happened. So because that was literally, you could see it in his little body, like he
Yeah.
knew he had agency, like he could run off, and he was free to move. So he had no
Mhm.
longer had the need to actually, like launch at that other dog. It was
Yeah.
really like it's so counterintuitive though, right?
Isn't it though? Yes, and so much of what I tell people to do is counterintuitive, and the reason it is because we have been culturally conditioned our whole lives to believe these out of date methods, and they have a system and an order to them, so we gravitate toward them because like this is what we do. This is how you teach a dog to sit and to stay and to come when called. Problem is that when you really need the dogs to do those things because there's potential problem looming in the distance, that all of it all falls apart.
Yeah. And when they
Because
don't trust you enough,
yeah.
they're not going to come when it's, when it's like, mm, yeah,
And if they're scared, they're going to automatically do what they need to do to feel safe. And sometimes what they do puts them in harm's way even more. And that's why we really need to protect them.
yeah,
So, that it can be a conflicting situation, but I think the bottom line is that in order to work with a sensitive dog, you have to create an environment or a context or a circumstance where that dog knows he's safe and knows that he has an escape route. And whether that's working with him inside your home or in your backyard or in a safe place where the dog feels relaxed, that's where you need to start. And the mistake that people make is that they put the dog into the triggering situation, figuring that that's where they're going to teach the dog. But the thing is, the dog's learning brain is shut down when he's in fight or flight. He can't think. And he
It's the
he
same for
can't.
us,
It's
isn't
not that
it?
he's not being difficult or stubborn, and that's a mistake that some people make. Not because they're unkind, but just because they can't figure it out. They're missing a piece of information, so they think, the dog is just being difficult, disobedient, stubborn, but that's not it at all.
I think, do you find that, because that's something that I've heard, or like this, oh, he does that on purpose, like he does that to peeve me off, or he's being defiant, or like, that whole
Yeah.
disobedient, as if the dog had some secret agenda there, to make your life difficult. And I've never seen it like that, but I've taken a lot of like criticism for not being strict with my sensitive dogs, right? Because I think, well, the last thing you need if you're already feeling unsafe is somebody who's being harsh with you. Like that made no
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah. There will always be critics who think they know more than you do about your own dog,
Come to
right?
Spain, you're going to get
So
loads of
they're
those.
they're always there, and we just have to live with them. But we also have to recognize that they don't have all the information.
Yeah.
That they're, and basically it's like thanks, but no thanks, that kind of thing. But and I always tell people your intuition is your best guide. You do what your gut, because your heart has its own intelligence.
Yeah.
And if your heart is telling you that this is the right thing to do for your dog, it doesn't matter what anybody else is telling you.
Yeah.
Even me. If I tell you something that your heart doesn't align with, don't listen to me. And the
But
same,
that requires quite a level of sort of confidence in your own judgment,
yeah.
and it's yeah, I think that's that whole journey that I've been on as a, we're like, okay, I got all of a sudden my little street dogs, I all of a sudden I had dogs. Oh, so I've
Yeah.
always wanted to, but they did come at, when they happened to cross my path. And this whole advocacy piece has been the journey, right? To go from like, I
Yes.
don't know, other people know better than I do, to going,
Mhm.
no, 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 no. I will look at my dog.
Yeah.
My dog is the one who knows. I think that's been quite a journey.
No one except you has the relationship with your dog that gives you the information you need. You have access to information that nobody else does.
Yeah.
So you need to use it. And I think you're right. It does take a certain confidence, and people do feel a little intimidated, and they do think, well, because I don't really know for sure what the answer is, then that other person must know more than I do.
Yeah.
But
I
that's
think
not true.
no, it's not true. But I think it is
Mhm.
typical, like in all areas of
Yeah.
life, really. So
Mhm.
I really would love you to share a little bit about that course with the beautifully provocative title, because that really is almost
Um,
like that next step that really helps people to say, well, okay, this makes
mhm.
sense. Now, where do I start?
Yeah. So this little course, I'll give you the title in a minute, and it is a provocative title, which I chose with a very clear intention in mind. Um, this came about because I was I was answering questions about this topic over and over and over again. And I finally decided that this was something that needed to be addressed. It's a very specific topic, but it covers an awful lot of the problems that people are confronting with their sensitive dogs. So it is a mini course. And so by mini course, I mean you can go through it fairly quickly. And it's self-study. You can go through it at your own pace. You have access to it. Once you buy it, you have access to it forever. It never expires. So the title of this course is Stop Desensitizing Your Sensitive Dog. Yeah,
I just could not love it more.
I know. So let me just say a little bit about desensitization. I'm not opposed to it. It's not a bad thing. It is a tool. It is an effective tool that can be used in behavior modification. But just like any tool, if it's used inappropriately, it's going to do damage. If you need a screwdriver and you use a hammer, you're going to make a mess. So, with desensitization, it is often recommended as like the go-to solution for any dogs that are reactive, sensitive, hyper aroused, all of those things. Just desensitize the dog. But nobody tells you how to do it. It's actually a very complex process. And people who are trained and who are professionals in the area of behavior modification or behavior analysis or psychology, all of those fields, people who are professional and who are trained know how to use this. It involves collecting a lot of data, and it involves using that data to determine the next step in the process. But people don't do that, do they? When they desensitize, they just grab a pouch of treats, they take the dog out
That's my
into
treat.
the situation that scares the dog, and the dog gets frantic and overaroused, and they start feeding the dog treats, and they think they're desensitizing the dog. That's not what desensitization is. So I'm telling people who have a sensitive dog to stop doing that. Just stop doing that. But, it's easy for me to say, stop doing that. And they're going to go, well,
What do I
what am
do
I supposed to
instead?
do?
You know?
What am I supposed to do? And that's a good question. So that's why I created this little mini course. And it starts with it has three main pillars to it. We start with bringing the dog into a more relaxed state, and that is a process. It has to do with co-regulation, which means that the dog is mirroring your feelings. So it has to do with getting yourself settled down first. And then creating, we talked about predictability before. That's powerful for sensitive dogs. And then it talks about gives you like an overall view of the system of not bringing the dog into situations that they're scared of and then feeding them treats and thinking that that's going to make the fear go away. But it's taking a dog that is relaxed and then has a sense of predictability about the world around him, and then gradually increasing his capacity, the capacity of his nervous system to process things that are new and different around him. And that's a process. It's not a quick fix. It doesn't happen fast. It happens gradually and consistently over time. But that's the outline of that little mini course, and we can make it available. I know you're going to put a link
I will
in the
put the
show
link
notes.
in the show notes. So if you're
Yeah.
watching this, listening to this,
Yeah.
it's going to be
And
easy to find right
it's
below this.
not, yeah, it's not a highly expensive course, but it does have a lot of valuable content. So it does have a price. It's only $97 US. Um, you have access to it forever. And as soon as you purchase the course, you immediately can start working on it. There's no waiting time at all. You can
Awesome.
immediately start to work on it. And you also, if there's something in it that you have a question about, people will sometimes email me with questions. And I don't, because this is a self-study course, it doesn't come with extended email support, but I can certainly answer a question in an email.
I love that. And the way you explained it, what feels so powerful to me about that is that when you actually address something at the root, when it's not just about, okay, how do I stop my dog to bite the mailman in the ankle?
Yeah.
It's when it's about increasing capacity to deal with new situations then it takes care of the mailman and it takes care of the neighbor's cat and it takes, like all the things will settle. It's not just like one particular thing that it will address. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Anka, absolutely. And I can just quickly tell you, I also have a COVID puppy. I adopted him at 10 weeks in January of 2020.
Oh.
So that tells you that tells you what the first 2 years of his life were like. And one of the things that he did, just to kind of respond with an example to what you just mentioned, one of the things that he did very early on is whenever a delivery came to the house, he would get frantic. He would go from window to window to window and he would bark and bark and bark and he would just be really over aroused. So instead of doing the things that, the old style training would say, is like cover the windows so he can't see, or pull him away, or tell him to sit and stay. Instead, I did what I eventually incorporated into my program, because this dog, Radar, was like my guinea pig. And so I went over to him and I said, "What's going on out there? What do you see?" And I just told him that I understood that he felt a little bit worried about, this person. And I know that looks different. And so I just went through the whole thing of talking to him in a way that was letting him know that I understood how he felt. And I wasn't telling him not to feel how he felt, but just that I hear you, I understand you, and so forth. And let's watch this together and see what happens. And the good thing is that the scary thing went away as we watched it. It went away. There was a big man and he was carrying boxes and, all this scary stuff, but he was barking and it went away. And then I told him he did a good job. Thank you for taking care of that problem. So it gave, his self-esteem and so forth. And what happened over time was that people will say, well, didn't the barking get worse because you were reinforcing that fear?
Rewarding him for barking, kind
Yeah,
of thing,
yeah. You don't reinforce fear. What I was doing was telling him that I knew how he felt it when his feelings were okay. It was okay to feel the way he felt. And I was there. And I wasn't worried about it myself. So there was a little co-regulation going on that he could mirror my feelings, but I wasn't telling him that he to stop feeling the way he felt. And what gradually happened over time and where we are now, 5 years later, is that when there's a delivery, there are times when he will simply ignore it. He might do a couple of little woof, woof, woofs, but then he'll just settle down and ignore it. But sometimes he will go to the window and he will bark. And I'll go, "Hey, what's going on?" And then he will come back to wherever I am and he will look at me and I'll say, "Oh, there's somebody out there, right? Oh, thanks. I'm glad you let me know. Go check it out." And he'll go to the window and look at it again. But his level of arousal is very relaxed. He just gets excited because, oh, there's somebody there. There's somebody doing something. Look at that. Come check this out, Mom. Do you see this? I go, "Yeah, I see it. No big deal."
Yeah.
So that's where we are. And that's part of that point that I made earlier, is that we have to let dogs know that we're on their side. I get it. I know that feels scary to you,
I think
you
that
know?
validating the feeling, I think it's the same, like we get that, when
Yeah.
you're like agitated over something, somebody goes like, "Oh, it's no big deal, just calm down. You're overreacting." Like this is the sure way to get your nose punched.
Yeah. Imagine if you're angry about something and the
Yeah.
person you're angry at says, "Calm down." Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's that
Loathing,
invalidation, it's
right?
that being misunderstood and underestimated. I think I mean,
Exactly.
we as people, we hate it. And I
Right.
think we do it to dogs all the time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And we need to stop that. And that's why
I
I type
agree.
course. You stop desensitizing your sensitive. So anyone who wants to sign up for that, it's available. Um, And I think it will give you information that you didn't know you needed.
Mm.
But when you get it, you'll say, oh my gosh,
Oh,
I wish I had known this. Right?
well, so where can be, I mean, obviously I'm going to pop the link there, but if somebody wants to get in touch with you, somebody wants to hire you, wants to find out what are you up to, where can people go and
Yeah.
connect with you?
One way is to um, send me an email. My email is really simple. It's Marilyn, Marilyn, at marilynmele.com, and you can put that in the show notes too. Just send me an email, say I'd like to work with you. Here's a little background of what I need, and then we can get together. And what I like to do when I work with someone, on a specific issue with their dog, and we're working together, either in my group program or for like a one-off personal support call, I like to talk to them first. So we might set up like a quick, 10, 15-minute call, just get on a Zoom call. We'll meet face to face, tell me what you need, and then I can tell you if I can support you with that. And then we can, decide what the next step is.
That makes
So
sense.
yeah, so send me an email. Occasionally people will message me. I have a Facebook group, Dog Wisdom Workshop on Facebook. You can ask to join that group. You can, private message me on Facebook. That's one way also. And then my website is marilynmele.com. But in order to get to that website, you need to put HTTPS
Yeah.
www dot in front of it. Otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't take you where you want to go. It
Okay.
might take you somewhere,
Okay,
but
we're
not
gonna
where
kind
you.
of make that clear. So thank you
Yeah,
so much.
yeah,
This was an
yeah,
absolute delight. And I think anybody with a sensitive dog will listen to this more than once and hopefully check out your course, because these dogs are brilliant teachers and beautiful wise souls that I think definitely deserve us to spend a little time to understand them and to give them what they
yeah.
need.
Yeah, and I think what most people really, really want is happiness for their dogs.
Yeah.
And that's my goal when I work with everybody, is we have to find a way to bring these dogs into the state of happiness that they deserve.
Couldn't
Okay,
couldn't
thank you for
say it
inviting
any
me. I think
nicer.
this was
Thank you
just
so much.
delightful.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so other dog lovers can find the show. If you haven't already, head over to soultouchedbydogs.com and sign up for weekly doggy cuteness, tips, recommendations, and personal stories to warm your dog-loving heart. And if you know a awesome human you think I should interview, I'd love an introduction. Email me at Anke, that's ANKE, at soultouchedbydogs.com.